Every year, thousands of people go missing in the United States, and a surprising number of those disappearances happen in or around the Appalachian Mountains. Locals who've lived near those forests for decades all seem to agree on one thing. There are rules you don't break out there. Don't go off the trail. Don't hike alone after dark. And if you hear someone calling your name from deep in the woods, don't answer, because sometimes it's not a person calling you. And the worst part, the people who ignore those rules usually don't come back to explain what happened. Story 1. Don't answer when it knows your voice. My name is Daniel. I'm 27 and I live in North Carolina. I've been hiking for most of my adult life, mostly as a way to clear my head after long weeks working in IT. I'm not one of those extreme survival guys or anything. I just like being out in nature, away from screens, away from noise. Back in October of last year, I decided to take a solo trip to a section of the Appalachian Trail I hadn't explored yet. It wasn't a particularly dangerous route, at least not according to the maps. Well-marked moderate difficulty, a few scenic overlooks. Pretty standard. I started early in the morning, just after sunrise. The air was cold enough that you could see your breath, but not freezing. The kind of weather that makes you feel awake. The first couple of hours were exactly what you'd expect. Quiet, peaceful. Just the sound of my boots on the dirt, the occasional rustle of leaves, birds somewhere overhead. Nothing unusual. Around midday, I stopped near a small clearing to eat. That's when I noticed something that felt off. It was quiet. Not peaceful forest quiet. I mean completely quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind, just silence. At the time, I remember thinking it was weird, but not enough to freak me out. Maybe just a lull in activity or something. So I packed up and kept going. About 30 minutes later, I heard it. Daniel. I froze. It sounded like my sister, not just similar, exactly like her voice. Same tone, same way she says my name when she's trying to get my attention. I turned around immediately. There was no one there, just the trail stretching behind me empty. I actually laughed a little. Like, okay, that was strange. Maybe my brain playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again. Daniel, wait. This time it sounded closer, and something about it made my stomach drop, because my sister lives 3 states away. And even if she didn't, there was absolutely no reason she'd be out there. I didn't answer. I don't know why, but something in my head just said, don't respond. Instead, I started walking faster. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Not loud, just enough to notice, like someone stepping carefully, matching my pace. I turned around again. Nothing. But the footsteps stopped at the exact same time I did. That's when it stopped being funny. I kept moving faster now, trying to stay on the trail. My heart was pounding, but I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. Then I heard it again, right behind me this time. Why are you ignoring me? Same voice. But wrong. The tone had changed. It was flatter, almost irritated. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. Eventually, after what felt like way longer than it should have, I reached a more populated section of the trail. I saw 2 other hikers, and the moment I did, the feeling just stopped. No more footsteps, no more voice, nothing. I asked them if they'd seen anyone behind me. They said no. I didn't finish the hike that day. I went straight back to my car and drove home. And I haven't gone hiking alone since, because I still don't know what was calling my name. But I know one thing for sure. It knew exactly how to sound like someone I trust. Story 2. The cabin that wasn't there before. My name is Marissa. I'm 31, and I live in eastern Tennessee. I work as a dental assistant during the week, and whenever I can get a long weekend, I usually disappear into the mountains with my boyfriend Tyler. We'd been camping together for almost 3 years at that point, so we had a routine down pretty well. He handled the gear, I handled the food. He liked acting like Bear Grylls. I liked making fun of him for it. That trip was supposed to be easy, nothing dramatic. Just 2 nights near a quieter part of the Appalachians that Tyler's co-worker had recommended. He said it wasn't one of the more touristy areas, which immediately made Tyler excited and me suspicious. In my experience, whenever a man says it'll be more private, what he means is there will be absolutely no one around to help if something goes wrong. Still, I went. We got there in the late afternoon and hiked in about 2 miles before setting up camp near a creek. It was beautiful in that very Appalachian way. Thick trees, uneven ground, everything damp, even when it hadn't rained in a day or 2. The air smelled like wet bark and cold stone. The first evening was completely normal. We made dinner on a tiny camp stove, sat around talking, and listened to the woods settle down for the night. At one point, Tyler asked if I wanted to do a short walk before bed, just down a little side path he'd noticed. I told him no because I'm not a movie character. He laughed, called me dramatic, and went to pee in the bushes like a true outdoorsman. The next morning, everything changed. We decided to explore farther out before coming back to camp for lunch. Tyler had downloaded an offline map, and between that and his usual overconfidence, he felt pretty sure about where we were going. For about an hour, the trail was clear enough. Then it got thinner. Not gone exactly, just less certain. Like fewer people had walked it. Branches hung lower. The ground got softer. We stopped seeing any sign that this was a maintained path at all. I told Tyler we should turn back. He said, let's just go another 10 minutes. I think 10 more minutes has started at least half the bad decisions in human history. So we kept going, and then we saw the cabin. It was maybe 50 yards ahead, through the trees partially hidden behind a slope. Small, dark wood. One narrow porch. No smoke, no car, nothing modern around it. It looked old, but not abandoned old. More like someone still used it and just didn't care much about appearances. Tyler looked at me and said, that's weird, which coming from him was basically a fire alarm. He checked the map again. Nothing, no marked structure, no ranger station, no private property line, just forest. I remember standing there thinking that the cabin didn't look like it belonged in the landscape. Not in a supernatural way exactly, just in a wrong way. Like seeing a chair sitting in the middle of a lake. We should have left immediately. Instead, we got closer. The front door was shut, but one of the windows had a curtain pulled halfway aside. Tyler stepped up onto the porch and knocked. Nothing. He knocked again. Still nothing. Then I noticed there were muddy boot prints on the porch. Fresh ones. Not ours. I said, someone's here. Tyler turned and said. That word annoyed me so much that even now I remember it. Maybe there were literal footprints. I told him I wanted to go. He said he just wanted to look around the side and make sure we weren't trespassing on somebody who might come back angry. Fair enough, I guess. We walked around the cabin slowly. There was a woodpile in the back, a rusted bucket, one broken chair, and a little metal hook by the side door with a lantern hanging from it. The lantern was warm. I didn't even realize I'd touched it until I jerked my hand back. Warm, not hot, but definitely not cold. Someone had used it recently. I said a lot louder this time. Tyler, I want to leave. Right now. He finally looked genuinely unsettled. That's when we heard something move inside. It was a small sound, like a floorboard shifting under someone's weight. We both froze. Then there was another sound. A scrape. Slow, like furniture dragging across a wooden floor. Tyler whispered, "Hello." No response. And then from inside the cabin, we heard 3 knocks. Not on the door, on the wall. 3 slow, deliberate knocks from the inside. I backed off the porch so fast I almost slipped. Tyler did the same. We were both staring at the window now, waiting to see someone step forward or pull the curtain or do literally anything a normal person would do. Nothing happened. The curtain didn't move. No one came out, but I knew we weren't alone. Tyler muttered, "Nope," which was the smartest thing he said all weekend, and we started walking back the way we came. At first we walked fast, then faster. Then I looked over my shoulder and saw the front door of the cabin standing open. I hadn't heard it open. I hadn't seen anyone come out. It was just open now, dark inside. I grabbed Tyler's arm and pointed. He looked, swore, and we both started moving as fast as we could without fully sprinting. Nobody wants to admit they're running scared in the woods, but there's a very short distance between power walking and panic. We found the trail again after maybe 15 minutes, though it felt much longer. Once we were back on something recognizable, the tension eased a little. Not much, just enough to breathe. When we got back to camp, the first thing Tyler said was, "Let's pack up." No argument from me, so we did. Broad daylight barely past noon, and we were breaking camp like the forest had just served us an eviction notice. Before we left, Tyler opened his offline map one more time and zoomed way out, then back in, then switched apps entirely. Still no cabin. Later that night, once we were back home, he called the coworker who'd recommended the area and asked if there were any private cabins off that route. The guy said no. Then he asked Tyler to describe where we'd gone. After Tyler did, there was a long pause. Then the coworker said, "You sure you went the right way?" Tyler said, "Yeah." The guy told him he'd hiked that same area for years and had never seen any structure out there. "I know what we saw. I know the lantern was warm. I know something was moving inside that cabin. And I know without question that when we left, the door was open. What bothers me most isn't the idea that someone was living out there. People live in strange places all the time. It's the part I can't explain. If someone was inside, why didn't they say anything? And if no one was inside, who knocked back? Story 3. We were being followed, but never saw it. My name is Caleb. I'm 24, and at the time this happened, I was a graduate student in Virginia. I spent most of my week in classrooms or staring at research articles, so when my friend suggested a 3-day hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains, I was in immediately. There were 4 of us: my friend Jordan, his cousin Nate, and Nate's girlfriend, Elena. We weren't expert backpackers, but we weren't clueless either. We had decent gear, food, water filters, and one of those inflated group egos that happens when 4 people collectively decide they are more prepared than they actually are. The first day went well. We started late in the morning, made good time, and spent most of the hike joking around. Jordan and Nate had that cousin energy where they insulted each other non-stop, like it was a love language, and Elena was way more competent than the rest of us put together. By the time we made camp that evening, everything still felt normal. It started just after dark. We were sitting around eating rehydrated noodles and pretending they weren't awful when we heard footsteps somewhere beyond the tree line. Not close, maybe 30 or 40 yards out. Just a few at first. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Jordan looked up and said, "Bear." Elena shook her head immediately. "Too slow," she said. That didn't make me feel better. We turned off our headlamps for a second and listened. Nothing. Then a minute later, another few steps, circling slightly to our left. Nate stood up and shined his light into the woods. We all stared at the trees, expecting eye shine or movement or something. Nothing. Eventually, we convinced ourselves it was an animal and went to bed. The next morning, Jordan found footprints near camp. Not super clear, but enough to tell they weren't from boots we recognized. He joked that maybe some mountain guy had been judging our camping setup all night. Nobody laughed very hard. We packed up and kept moving. All day, I had this low-grade feeling that we weren't alone. I didn't say anything at first because I didn't want to be the paranoid one, but little things kept happening. We'd stop to drink water, and a few seconds later, I'd hear movement behind us. We'd start walking again, and it would stop. At one point, Elena turned and said, "'Kay, did anyone else hear that?" So apparently, I wasn't the only one. Jordan tried to stay rational. He said it could be another hiker trying to avoid us, or maybe someone on a game trail moving parallel. Possible, sure. Still creepy. That afternoon, the trail narrowed and ran alongside a steep drop on one side and thick brush on the other. Visibility got worse. You couldn't see more than maybe 15 feet into the woods. That's when the smell started. At first, it was faint. Just this weird metallic smell, mixed with something damp and rotten. Not strong enough to identify, but strong enough to notice. Nate said it smelled like dead animal. Elena said it smelled like old pennies and wet fur. Neither description was helpful. We came to a small clearing around sunset and decided to camp there. No one said it directly, but I think we all wanted open sight lines. We didn't want trees right up against the tent walls. Dinner was quiet that night. Nobody was in the joking mood anymore. Then, just as full dark settled in, we heard the footsteps again, closer this time, slow, intentional. One said it first, then maybe two. Or maybe one thing moving oddly. I still can't tell you. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Always just outside the light. Jordan yelled, "Hey!" The footsteps stopped. He said louder, "If someone's out there, this isn't funny." No response. Then Nate. Because Nate grabbed a flashlight and started walking toward the trees. Elena hissed at him to stop. He took maybe 5 steps off the edge of camp and then froze. We all saw it at the same time. Not a person. Not clearly. Just the shape of something taller than the brush, standing between 2 trees. It didn't move. It didn't reflect light. It was just there, dark against dark, in a place where there should have been empty space. Nate backed up without saying a word. None of us slept much that night. Every so often we'd hear movement circling camp. Never rushing, never attacking. Just pacing. It's hard to explain how much worse that is than something charging at you. A charge is immediate, simple. You react. This felt like being studied. The next morning, Jordan wanted to cut the trip short. No debate this time. We packed fast and started hiking out. And whatever had been following us, followed us all day. Sometimes on the left, sometimes the right, sometimes behind. Always far enough away that we couldn't get a clear look. Around noon, I made the mistake of slowing down to adjust my pack. I fell a little behind the others, maybe 20 feet. That's when I heard breathing, right over my shoulder. I spun around so fast I nearly fell. There was nothing there, but the brush behind me was moving. Not like wind. There wasn't any wind. Something had just stepped back into it. I don't think I've ever caught up to a group faster in my life. When I told the others, Elena just nodded like she believed me immediately. That scared me more than if she'd laughed. A couple hours later, we finally started seeing signs of civilization. Again, trail markers. A maintenance box. Then another group of hikers coming from the opposite direction. The feeling vanished almost instantly. No footsteps, no smell, no movement, just woods. We didn't tell the other hikers much. Just asked if they'd seen anyone else out there. They said no. When we reached the parking lot, all 4 of us were quieter than I'd ever seen us. We should have been relieved. Instead, we were confused. A week later, Jordan texted our group chat with a photo he'd taken on the second night. It was one of those accidental low-light shots where he'd meant to photograph camp, and mostly got darkness. He said he'd been scrolling through his camera roll and noticed something in the background. At first, I thought it was just tree shadow. Then I zoomed in. Between the trees at the edge of the clearing, there was a vertical shape that didn't match any trunk around it. Too narrow to be a tree, too tall to be a person standing naturally, and weirdly uneven. Like it wasn't facing the camera straight on. Could it have been a trick of light? Absolutely. That's probably what it was. Probably. But none of us have gone back there. And to this day, if one of us brings up that trip, somebody always says the same thing. At least it never got close. I'm not sure that's comforting, because whatever it was, it didn't need to. Story 4. He knew my name before I said it. My name is Rebecca. I'm 29, and I'm from West Virginia. I grew up not far from the mountains, which means I also grew up hearing all the stories people tell about them. Most of them I assumed were exaggerated. You know how it is. Every region has its folklore. Every older relative has a warning that sounds suspiciously like a superstition wrapped in local pride. My uncle used to say things like, "If the woods go quiet, go home." My grandmother had a stricter one. If somebody calls you from the tree line at night, and you can't see their face, no, they didn't. That was the exact kind of sentence I used to roll my eyes at. Then I had a car problem on a mountain road in late November, and now I don't roll my eyes at much anymore. I'd been driving back from visiting a friend and took a less traveled route, because my GPS said it would shave 20 minutes off the trip. That should have been my first warning. GPS optimism has gotten more people into bad situations than I think we talk about enough. The road itself wasn't terrible at first. Narrow, winding, no streetlights, but manageable. Then the weather shifted. A mist came in low across the road, and visibility dropped fast. A few minutes later, my check engine light came on. Then the car started making a noise I can only describe as mechanical coughing. I pulled off to the side near a gravel turnout and sat there for a second, just staring at the dashboard. Like maybe if I looked disappointed enough, it would fix itself. No such luck. I checked my phone. No signal, of course. I popped the hood, even though I know almost nothing about cars. That ritual is really just human theater. We open the hood, stare at the engine, like it personally betrayed us, and hope competence arrives. The air had gotten colder, and everything around me was still. No other cars, no houses, just road trees, mist. Then I heard someone say, "Trouble tonight." Rebecca. I spun around so hard I hit my shoulder on the hood. There was a man standing a few yards behind me on the shoulder of the road. I hadn't heard him approach. That was the first thing that felt wrong. The second was that he knew my name. He looked to be maybe in his 50s or 60s. Hard to tell exactly. Average height, heavy coat, dark hat. Nothing dramatic. If I'd seen him at a gas station in daylight, I probably wouldn't have looked twice. But standing there in the mist on an empty mountain road, he looked deeply out of place. I said, "How do you know my name?" He smiled a little and nodded toward the back of my car. I turned and saw my license plate frame. Had one of those dumb custom hometown slogans on it, my town name across the bottom. And apparently hanging from my rearview mirror, I had one of those little teacher tags from a school fundraiser with my first name written on it. Logical enough. It should have reassured me. It didn't. He took a step closer and said, "Engine sounds bad." I said, "Yeah." He asked where I was headed. I told him home. He asked where home was. I didn't answer that one. Something about him wasn't aggressive exactly. He wasn't threatening in the obvious way people in stories are threatening. He was calm, polite. Maybe too polite. like he already knew I'd stay in the conversation because it would feel rude not to. He glanced into the trees across the road, then back at me, and he said, "You don't want to be stopped here after dark." I remember almost laughing because by that point, it was already dark. "Thanks, mystery man. Great timing." He offered to take a look under the hood. I said no. He nodded like he expected that, and said smart. Then he added, "Till, I wouldn't sit in the car if I were you." That's when the fear changed shape. Up to that point, I'd been worried about him. Now I wasn't sure if he was warning me about himself or something else. I said, "Why?" He was quiet for a moment, then looked past me toward the woods. Because once the tapping starts, he said people usually make the wrong choice. That sentence hit every possible internal alarm at once. I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer directly. He just said, "If you hear it on one side, don't look to the other." I know how insane that sounds. Believe me, I know. But the strangest part was how matter-of-fact he said it. Not dramatic, not spooky. Just like he was giving directions. I took a step back toward my driver's side door and said I was fine. "Thank you." He looked at me for a long second. Then he said, "No, you're not." And right then, from somewhere in the trees behind my car, I heard it. Tap. Just one. Soft. Wooden. Like someone had tapped a knuckle against a tree trunk. I stared into the darkness behind the vehicle. Nothing. Then, tap, tap. Closer. The man didn't turn around. He didn't even flinch. He just kept looking at me and said very quietly, "Get in the car. Lock it. And do not answer anything that sounds like me." I got in so fast, I dropped my keys between the seat and the console for half a second and nearly started crying right there. By the time I slammed the door and locked it, the man had stepped away from the front of the car and was standing near the edge of the road, still facing me, still calm. Then came the tapping again, this time from my left. Slow. Deliberate. Against the driver's side rear window. I whipped my head around. Nothing was there. Not a branch. Not a hand, nothing. But the sound came again. Tap. From the passenger side now. My entire body went cold. I looked forward, and the man was gone. Not walking away. Not disappearing into the mist. Just gone from where he'd been standing. And then I heard his voice from outside the car, on the passenger side. "Rebecca," it said. "Open the door." Same voice. Same tone. But the mouth that had spoken to me minutes ago was no longer attached to anyone I could see. I stared straight ahead so hard my eyes watered. The voice came again, a little lower this time. "You can't stay in there all night." Then the tapping moved to the windshield. Tap, tap, tap. I did the only useful thing I could think of. I started the car. By some miracle, it turned over. It sounded horrible. But it started. I hit reverse too fast. Gravel spraying, and swung the car back onto the road. I don't remember the first mile of that drive. I just remember gripping the wheel so hard my hands cramped, and refusing to look into the mirrors. When I finally reached a gas station with lights and people, I pulled in shaking so badly, the clerk thought I was having a medical emergency. A state trooper ended up meeting me there after the clerk called it in. I told him everything except the weirdest parts because I didn't feel like being professionally evaluated in a convenience store parking lot. I just said a man had approached me. My car broke down, and something scared me badly enough that I drove off. The trooper asked where exactly I'd been. I told him. His expression changed just a little. Not shock, not disbelief. More like tired recognition. He asked me to describe the man. I did. Then he said something I still think about all the time. He said, "You're not the first person to mention someone helping people on that road." I asked if they knew who he was. He said no. Then I asked if anyone had ever figured out what the tapping was. He looked at me for a second too long and said, "Ma'am, if someone tells you not to answer something up there, you listen." That was it. No explanation, no follow-up, just that. My car ended up needing a tow the next morning. The mechanic said the engine issue was real, but not catastrophic. He thought it was strange I'd managed to restart it without a problem after I'd said it nearly died on me. I've never driven that road again. I also took my name tag off the mirror because I'd really like to stop giving strangers and whatever else is out there a head start. Maybe the man was real. Maybe he was some local who'd seen enough weird things to recognize when someone was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe. But I still can't explain how he vanished, and I definitely can't explain why later that night, after I got home, I found 3 faint marks on the outside of my passenger door. Not scratches, not dents, just 3 small, evenly spaced taps in the dust, as if something had stood there waiting for me to let it in. The Appalachian Mountains are beautiful ancient, and if these stories are anything to go by, not all was as empty as they seem. Maybe every sound in the woods has a logical explanation. Maybe every shadow between the trees is just your imagination working overtime. And maybe every strange person on a mountain road is simply a stranger passing through. But when enough people come back from the same place with stories that sound different on the surface and wrong in exactly the same way underneath, you start to wonder. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and let me know which one unsettled you the most. And if you've had a strange experience in the mountains or anywhere else, send it in. I'd love to read it in a future video. Thank you so much for listening, for sharing your time with me, and for being here. Until next time, stay safe, stay smart, and maybe if the woods call your name, don't answer.